Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, JD Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join JD now and listen in on this leading conversation.
We are so happy to have the lovely and talented Peyton Jones with us today. Peyton is a church planting leader. He is an author, actually wrote the book on church planting and then wrote another one and then wrote another one. And he's expert in this stuff. So thank you for being with us today, Peyton.
Oh, thanks for having me, JD. It's a privilege, man. I loved your books. I read both of them. The Planting the Other Way and in the Other Direction, and also the Preaching, which I think you'll find a lot of synergy in how we think.
Yeah, I think we're pretty well connected, Peyton. So I have a bunch of questions for you. Here's my first one. Where'd you get the name? Was your father a quarterback or a running back? Peyton, is that a family name?
It is a family name. It was actually my grandmother's maiden name, but the problem is my grandfather was a historian in Virginia, and he knew all of our family history. He was actually a best-selling Civil War author, wrote a lot of different books, and he went back in the family tree and found Peyton Randolph, who was the son of John Randolph, who was the president of the First Continental Congress. Before there was a VP, there was John Randolph, and that's one of my ancestors. So Peyton Randolph was his son, and that's how I got my name. So now you know my middle name as well, Peyton Randolph Jones.
Peyton Randolph. That just sounds smart. So it fits pretty good.
You know, I hated that name because it sounds like Little Lord Fauntleroy, you know, like complete with pantaloons and everything. It's very fancy. And then I looked it up once because I was doing this thing for a men's study, and it's like Nordic means wolf shield. And I'm like, oh, I'm in. That's great. Peyton means warrior. Randolph means wolf shield. I'm in.
That is great. My name is James, which comes from Jacob, which means trickster. So
Dang.
Hey, I want to get into ask you about a couple of your books, especially the new one, the Church Plantology. I have it right here. I tried to start in, but tell me a little bit about your story. How did you get to the place where you came to Christ, and how did you get into church planting in the first place?
Yeah, I came to Christ because I was getting ready to be expelled out of school, and a student teacher was praying for me. He was sharing the gospel actually with a girl that I dated, and she said, "If you want to talk to somebody, talk to that guy. He needs Jesus more than anybody." So, incidentally, it's one of my wife's best friends now. But so he shared the gospel with me, and I came to faith. He was like, "Hey, I can't talk to you about this in class, but I can talk to you after school." And he said, he walked through with me all these things about the gospel. And it was one phrase that he said that was like a bullet to my brain. I would never say this, I'm sharing the gospel. I don't think any of us think to go back to the second coming of Christ as like the main thing. But the Holy Spirit just shot a bullet to my brain. He said, he's coming back. And at that moment, I knew that was true. I couldn't tell you how. It was just conviction of the Holy Spirit. And I said to him, well, I hope he doesn't come back today, man, because if he does, I'm screwed. And that night I went to bed. My mom had a crucifix on the wall. We weren't Catholics, but she just had one for decoration. I picked it off the wall, and there was a Gideon Bible in the house. I grabbed that and went to bed, tucked up with him, and whispered a prayer and said, hey, don't come back tonight, okay? Just give me a couple days till I figure this out. And a few weeks went by. I kept hearing the gospel, and finally, I have no idea. Every altar call, I kept going to church, Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa with Chuck Smith, Greg Laurie, all those guys. I kept going there. I went forward to every altar call. I said the Lord's Prayer like Dr. Seuss, in a box, with a fox, on a train, in the rain, in the back of a 66 Mustang. I hope that was the way I got saved. I don't know when it happened, but I hope I got saved in style. That would be getting saved in style. But over the years, man, I just, I got discipled really well by the guy who led me to Christ. He took me out like Jesus did his disciples. He would be like, hey, let's go talk to people. And it was Calvary Chapel. It was a bunch of hippies, after all, that, were running this thing. There's no organization. I'm no longer a part of Calvary Chapel, but I appreciate many of the things that they gave me early on. And I went straight from there into the Reform camp. I've been all over. Like, I've been Methodist, Presbyterian, RCA. I've been everywhere. So
you've been everywhere, man, huh?
And it's been all over me.
Hey, I think that's a great evangelistic strategy. That if you're sharing with someone and they're just not interested, you can ask them, okay, maybe you don't need this. Who here does?
Yeah.
And maybe they'll point us to Peyton. And as somebody who owns two 66 Mustangs, that's the best thing I've ever heard about that happened in the backseat of a 66 Mustang.
Right. Other things happened there, but that was maybe a good thing.
Great. Now, the church planting thing, how did that happen?
So, like I said, I was part of Calvary Chapel. And when you get a bunch of hippies let loose on mission, there's no organization. Like, there was no Baptist fundraising thermometer, hey, we've almost raised enough money. It was just where God guides, he provides, man. So I ended up going on, church planting missions to New Zealand, to Hungary. My wife was a missionary before we were married. She was in Thailand trying to help rescue kids out of sex trafficking. She worked with a woman that had been there for decades. I ended up very young being sucked in. Like, I always tell people, I got into ministry through the back door. Like, the pastors at my church, I was in a growing megachurch in Huntington Beach. And I was with this little church plant. It was 50 people when I got there, and it just grew, and it's now like thousands. But I ended up on staff there because at 19 years old, the youth pastor's wife had schizophrenia. And the pastor was like, hey, would you babysit this thing? And I said, sure, I'll do it for a couple months, no problem. And his wife didn't get better for a number of years. And so I ended up being there, and then just everybody kept either morally falling and it was just kind of like, well, I guess I'm going to hold this bag for a while. During that time, I got a very deep set calling to Wales. And so I went from Huntington Beach to Martin Lloyd-Jones's church. My mentor was one of Lloyd-Jones's proteges. And I ended up becoming the evangelist at Sandfields. And that led to a first church plant out of Sandfields.
Can I ask, how did you get a deep calling to Wales?
It was weird. So I was reading... I knew since I was a young believer, this is going to sound really weird, but when the guy who led me to Christ left, he shoved two books in my hands, Lloyd-Jones' Sermon on the Mount and Spurgeon Lectures of my students. I've asked him this day, why did you shove those in my hand? As he was leaving for like evangelism school, he goes, hey, read these. And I said, okay. So I'm like 15 years old. I'm struggling through Spurgeon Lectures of my students, but I knew as a young man, I was like, one day I'm going to train other people. Well, Lloyd-Jones, I mean, that guy just broke open to me like how to exposit the word. So I cut my teeth on that stuff for a few years. Well, I was in nursing school. I had to take nursing classes, ROP classes, they call them, like health science classes in high school to graduate on time. I was a very bad student. And ended up having to take nursing to graduate. So summer school, and you get a CNA, which is certified nursing assistant. So when I got back to school senior year, the career counselor's like, you need to just go into nursing. You're halfway, you're like a quarter of the way there to being an RN. Just bullet through. Well, I started feeling a call to mission. And I'm like, man, I think I'm supposed to be a nurse so that I can go to the mission field. Well, one of these days when I was on my break doing my prereqs for nursing, I was reading Lloyd-Jones's Romans. And at the very back of the book, there was this thing about his past, the London Theological Seminary. Excuse me. And as I read through that, something just kind of burned. And I literally felt like God just whispered in my heart, you're going over there. And your ministry is going to be over there, not here. Now, keep in mind, within a year's time, maybe 2 years' time, I'm 23 years old and I'm the interim pastor of this megachurch. So I told the elders, hey, I can't stay here and hold the bag. I got to go overseas. So I told them I'd give them a 5-year commitment, but I was actually in Wales within 2 years. But that was it, sitting on that park bench on break, student, community college. And God was like, you're going over here. And so that burden for Wales in particular grew because, and this is my life. It's more like a cartoon than a Hudson Taylor biography. But I remember I just liked this rock band from Wales. My ancestry is Wales, Jones. Whenever you see a Jones, you're looking at a Welshman. And I just remember like going over there partway through nursing school to just explore, like, I think I have a burden for this calling. They were dead. They were the land of revivals, and they're dead. Less than 3% went to church. So because I had this mission bug, I wanted to go where I was needed. And so when I was on staff at this megachurch, I remember looking out the window, and I talk about this in my second book, Reaching the Unreached, where I looked out the window and I could see, I'm in a megachurch, and I can see the roof of 2 other churches. And I remember just kind of having this existential crisis, like, what in the heck am I doing here? Right? Like, the girl that I'm falling in love with is a missionary in Thailand. I've got this mission burden. All my heroes are missionaries. What in the heck am I doing in Huntington Beach in the heart of Yuppieville in a church of thousands at 23 years old? I'm in the wrong place.
So you got to Wales. Did you start in a bar? Maybe I should say, did you? Is that what you got there and you started a bar? Did you start
Actually,
ministry?
That's another story.
Bar?
So, sort of. We actually we started. It was funny. I got to Lloyd-Jones's church, and it was very traditional. I mean, pipe organ, the whole thing. Luckily, they were not wearing like the Geneva gowns or nothing that serious, but it was still very much tie collar, pipe organ. And I remember thinking, wow, the people out here, they have nothing to do with, like, there are 2 cultures. It's like the tale of 2 cities here, because we're in a steelworking town. So like, that's not a scar right there, that one. I mean, that's not a wrinkle. These are wrinkles. That's a scar. That's from me it was a rough town. It was a steelworking town. I got beat up within like 10 weeks of being there. Just different street smarts, and it was a rough place. And if you ever read, there's a book called Memories of Sandfields that Martin Lloyd-Jones's wife wrote about that place and some of the rough characters. Well, I encountered them with my head at least once. And it was an amazing place. The people were amazing. It was rough. It was dirty. It was grotty there. And in fact, Blade Runner was filmed in the factory there for the Mars scenes of Blade Runner that got cut out of the movie. But really, to be honest, I forgot your question. I got a little lost in my memories.
My question is, do you think Martin Lloyd-Jones really wished his name was Peyton Randolph Jones?
No, he never did. He would turn over in his grave. The number of times I thought, man, he's my hero, but he would turn over in his grave if he knew I was here.
I was asking if I think you started over there in kind of a pub.
Yeah. So what I was going to say was this is where I was going, is they hired me on as the evangelist, but they didn't have money. I mean, I was still being supported from the States, from the church I came from. And I said, yeah, I'll be the evangelist. What does he do? I know that's a dumb question, but what do you guys do to evangelize? And they're like, well, we hold meetings where like maybe a rugby player shares his testimony. We do go door to door. We sometimes preach in the open air like once a month. And all this stuff that was considered really hardcore evangelism, none of it was effective. But I did it because I thought, well, I don't want to be the ugly American coming on the scene and telling them, oh, hey, you're doing it wrong. Because nothing we did in America would have worked there. So I just did it. But one of the things I did is I said, you know what I think would work is if we went out to the pubs and nightclubs on Friday nights and just talked to people. And so we took a video camera and I made a track. I actually published a track when my first year there based on The Matrix, because this is like 1999. The Matrix was new and hot. I could get people to stop and talk, and it was beautiful, this thing. I mean, it was glossy, it was pictures, a total copyright infringement, but people would stop and talk. And then once we had that video camera up, we just asked them, what do you think about God? What do you think about this? What do you think the meaning of life is? We'd have people just weeping and sobbing on the street. But what was interesting was the men in the church. There are a lot of really big dudes, like steelworker dudes in the church. And they're like, I remember the first night we turned out to do this, like 6 or 7 dudes. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. Like, this church has a heart for evangelism. Turns out the pastor's like, they're going to murder him. You better get out there and protect him. So they were bodyguards. They weren't actually, they didn't think it. In fact,
they weren't deacons and elders. They were bodyguards.
Exactly. And what actually ended up happening is my support dropped in half. Here's the irony. I got them out there, and that, like, it switched something on in these guys, right? Turned out one of the guys had beaten a guy nearly to death and hospitalized him in a fit of rage years earlier, had lived under condemnation, never thought God could use him. He goes out there and God starts using him. He was a terrible evangelist at first. He would ask people things like, have you seen The Matrix? Would you like to talk about God? And they'd be like, no, mate, it's crap. And he'd be like, oh, and he'd be crestfallen. Well, over time, he started learning how to talk to people very naturally. But that guy, 9/11 hits, my support drops in half. I end up in the very factory that most of these guys work in, 9 to 5, because I had to pay my bills. Almost immediately, because these guys now are gospel animals. There, it was like one sowed, another watered, another reaped. They'd send all these people to me on break in canteen. All these conversions started falling like dominoes in that in the factory, and I was like, this is something right here. So I got deconstructed as a minister during, you always hear like Wesley where he goes off to convert the heathens on the voyage to America with the Moravians, but he says, alas, who will convert me? For me, it was like God was showing me, hey, you know how Paul was bivocational? You don't like this. Like, that was my greatest fear, was losing my paycheck. And all of a sudden now I'm working with my hands and I'm reaching all these people on the factory floor on this assembly line. I'm like, okay. So I continued that. I was a firefighter after that. I was an RN, if you remember. So I became a clinical troubleshooter. I was a barista. I accidentally planted a Starbucks. I mean, I stayed that way until my last year there. Had a, bank full of money at this church planting hub that we started with, shooting off churches. And finally the elders are like, look, you're adopting a baby. You need to come on staff. And I just started reproducing myself. I poured all my time into that. So that's my journey.
That is great stuff. Hey, let's pause a second and sell some books here if we can. Give us a minute on Church Zero, and then the Raiders of the Lost Art. Those 2 books, and then I want to dig a little bit into the Church Plantology. Church
Zero is about the A team, the apostolic team, the strike teams that Paul did. It's an apologetic of team church planting, not one individual, but planning in teams. And a bit like the A team, if you can find it, because in my contract I retained the right. So if you can find it, you'll probably find it used. I have the publishing rights, so I'm getting ready to republish it. But you can still find it on like Amazon.
It is on Amazon right in front of me. And you could get it for the low price of $29.95.
Oh my gosh.
That's prime. And I think my first book is selling for probably just the 95. So
$95?
No, 95 cents. Yours is $29.95.
Wow. That's amazing. I need to republish that thing. I never wanted to make money from books, funny enough. I actually was like, I told Zondervan, just pour all the money. I mean, David C. Cook, pour all the money back into marketing. I don't need a thing. But they did actually give that book away free for a couple months, and it got out there. But that book was it was more of a manifesto of philosophy of ministry, of team planting, but it wasn't a how-to. Reaching the Unreached was a book, Becoming Raiders of the Lost Art, was, get this, right? Published in 2017. It was a book about getting the church out into public space. Who knew? COVID, right? Who knew that churches... I didn't, but I remember thinking, and I even said in the book, hey, if this doesn't make sense, it'll make sense in about 5 to 10 years' time. Who knew, right? It to me now, looking back, almost seems like a prophetic call. It was ahead of the curve of the problems that COVID exposed. The key to that book is mobilization of every believer in their gift, so that if a Sunday service shuts down, and that's one of the things in the new book, when I train planners, I would always ask them this question at the end of the first month of training: describe your Sunday service to me, except you can't start a Sunday service. Now, what does it look like? Because when you've cracked that nut, you've actually cracked the secret to church planting. You figured out the reason that 70% of church plants fail. So that book was mobilizing every believer. And then the recent one is Church Plantology.
Yeah, Church Plantology, the art and science of planting churches, came out like in the last month. I have my copy here. It looks thicker than a Martin Lloyd-Jones work. But that makes sense to me. Okay, now I get it. You're the deep thinker guy.
I don't know about that. I think I'm like the stupid man's Alan Hirsch. That might be a more adequate way. He's the Einstein, and I think I'd be like the Guy Fieri.
You're the Alan Hirsch, but I can understand what you're saying when you talk. So just it's down on the level for those of us who can't go into that stratosphere. Now, this is kind of a textbook on church planting, isn't it?
It is a textbook. Zondervan wanted something to sit alongside Center Church with Tim Keller. Now, he's a brainiac. He's Lloyd-Jones with new skin on, right? Modern clothes. But they wanted something. They said, that's really a book that's an urban manifesto of ministry. What we really need is a core church planting book. And the guys over at Zondervan have been really, really good to me. Reaching the Unreached was not a bestseller. It didn't, books on prayer and evangelism don't tend to make it big. And really, Reaching the Unreached,
that really kill it are the ones on church planting. I'll just let you know.
Well, it's really funny. This book is doing extremely well. Like, I won't tell you how well it's doing, but the things that they're telling me right now are kind of mind blowing, and it's really resonating because for the long, like when they approached me and said, "Hey, would you write this?" I didn't want to write a church planting book. I've been running the Church Planter podcast for years, and I was like, you know what? There's younger guys coming up in their 30s. I'm almost 50 now. I think I need to kind of like take a back seat, use my platform, hand that over to the younger generation coming up. Some of my people that I work with said, no, it's okay to bring the Timothys on, but you're still Paul, like still stay in there. So I'm rethinking that, but that's where I was. And that's kind of where I've been for a little bit. And Zondervan, after I had just given everything back to the Lord, like, I don't need this. And JD, you know me a little bit, right? We've had talks, and I'm always a guy that's like, I don't want stuff. I don't want things. I don't need anything. I'm good.
You are not high on the materialistic bent.
Yeah.
Quite simple man.
Yeah. And so what was kind of funny is, I felt like, okay, I'll write this and it'll kind of be my swan song to church planting. But I warned Zondervan, when I write this, it's not going to be like church starting, like literally like JD, like I'm going to say this, not just because you're here, but you and I have talked about this. I freaking loved your book. I thought your book was like, man, that thing is hot. That needed to be said. And it just, like I said, like I remember reading it going, dude, we think alike. Like I want to get to know you better, And so like when Church Plantology, when I wrote that, it was very much in the same vein of there's a difference between church starting and church planting. Church starting is basically starting off with the church name that's kind of flashy, the website, which is a little sexy, the rented space, and then trying to gather a crowd. You do that, you're gold if you're a church starter. If you can keep that crowd after you've gathered the crowd, you're good. But that's not anything that the apostles did.
Right.
Excuse me. If anything, Jesus modeled, when you get a crowd, piss them off, right? Paul followed the same. He picked a fight with things on purpose sometimes in a city. Saying Jesus is Lord he was picking a fight with Caesar. He literally was saying he started it, right? He says he's Lord. He's not Lord. Jesus is Lord. I'm challenging that. So Paul had this kind of provocative thing that was causing controversy. And so what church planting is it's sowing the seeds of the gospel. It's discipleship. It's one-on-one. It's sometimes small group. It's the slow burn, not the big flash. It's not the quick, shake and bake church planting scheme. And I think for this generation who are like, I want to be bivocational. I want to have a job where I pay my bills. I want to live like the people I'm leading, which, by the way, I'm not against taking a salary as a church planter. One of the things I point out in the book is that Paul let mission dictate. So in Ephesus, he was lecturing daily in the hall of Tyrannus. He wasn't working with his hands in. He was living off support, and he was getting paid for what he did. The worker's worthy of his wage. That's straight out of the mouth of Jesus. Paul quotes it back to Timothy. Nothing wrong, but the mission dictated, and it's the same for me. I'll go work with my hands when the mission dictates it. I'll go, I'll live off support when the mission dictates it. It just depends on what God's calling me to at that moment. But church plantology, where was I? I'm losing my train of thought again.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm getting into the book, and then I'm looking ahead, and all of it's like, okay, I'm really looking forward to this. But there was this term you use, strike force. I'm like, I got to get to that chapter. Tell us, what is the strike force?
So whenever you see teams, this is kind of like I said, Church Zero was the apologetic for team planting, but people would say, hey, I get it. You convinced me. I didn't come from this background. I get it now. I see what Paul was doing, but tell me how. So what the chapters on team are, is it tells you that there's a team who stays. And so think of like an APES team, right? Paul on his first missionary journey, he is traveling with Barnabas and John Mark and himself. They spend the bulk of the ministry where Barnabas and John Mark were from, which was the Isle of Cyprus. And then once they're done with Cyprus, they go up to where Paul was from, which was Turkey. So while they're there, they come back, and a year in, Paul's back at home base in Antioch. He's drinking his coffee, reading his newspaper, and he spits his coffee out when he reads a headline or gets the mail that says, hey, they're in heresy now. And he thinks, I got to go back. Well, he changes up. He switches up because he realizes, I didn't leave anyone behind. We all came back. We just left them to their own devices. So you start seeing that Paul starts employing Jesus's methodology of training up others and really pouring in, like Jesus did for 3 years into the 12. Paul starts pouring into the Timothys, and it's the first place he goes. He goes to Lystra and Derbe, he gets Timothy. And he starts picking up Dr. Luke on that second journey. Like when he says the Spirit forbade us, and they go to Troas, they pick up Luke there. And I point all this out in the book that this was all about team. So the strike team is, once Paul had planted, he planted a church on average in between 3 to 4 months. But once he planted, he would raise up a team of elders that Titus tells us about, but he would also leave a couple people behind. And that was the FIST team. The team that moved out with him would be the strike team that would hit the next city or the next spot in that city. So strike teams are the teams that go out, and FIST teams are the teams that stay. And the FIST team is still an APES team, and the strike team is still an APES. So at the very beginning, this is part of the Exponential series. One of the things that I've really appreciated about Exponential is they've really challenged that if you're not a multiplying church, you're actually in disobedience to the Great Commission. So, and not to come down on this small little church that's struggling. There's still a part they can play, and Exponential's pointed that out. But the point is, everybody ought to be contributing in some way to multiplication. So it's a multiplication principle, is what I'm pointing out there.
Cool. Well, I encourage everyone to pick up this book. Pay the $28.25 for this book.
So that's a good price. It's normally $36.99. So that's retail.
Excuse me.
It is 500 pages.
Most of the money goes right into your pocket. No, I'm just giving that away. I know that. Hey, let me just leave you. We're about out of time here. What's a challenge you want to give us? Take a couple minutes. Just give us the Peyton Jones challenge.
Ooh, well, I might have given it with that. Describe your Sunday service. I think the challenge that I would give is we're at the tail end of COVID now, or at least the tapering of COVID. We don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Future of the church, all the gurus with the crystal balls out there. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's coming next. Could be that we end up right back in lockdown and churches are none the wiser. So I don't believe a lot of the future stuff. But what I would say is you have been handed a golden opportunity right now to actually rethink everything about your model, about your mission, about how you operate. God has handed to you. Listen, I talk to guys like Alan Hirsch. I talked to Alan. I said, Alan, what are you thinking right now? He said, I have writer's block. Talked to Hugh Halter. Hey, what do you say about COVID? This is like 8-9 months ago. Hugh Halter was like, I feel like everything I said before, is what the church needs now. Same with me, with reaching the unreached. I actually believe Church Plantology is kind of the reset book for people to rethink a philosophy of ministry. But I would say if you're just looking to open up as normal, you are missing the opportunity that God has given you. God, we have never had a time where every existing church has an excuse to change everything. Changing churches is hard, but God has given you. Jesus said to the Pharisees, you discern the sky, the signs in the sky, and you say, tomorrow will be rain or tomorrow will be sunny, fair weather. But he says, you cannot discern the times. And I would say God right now has been speaking for 10 to 15 years to guys like Jim Peterson, Alan Hirsch, Dave Ferguson. I mean, so many, the list goes on. I always believe if God's saying one thing to one person, I don't want to be the guru. I don't want to be original. But I believe if God's saying something, it's truly him. He's saying it to a bunch of people, like through your book, through my book, through a bunch of us. But what I would say is, have we been listening? Has the church been listening? It's kind of like when Jesus told them to spread out from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth. They didn't listen. Years in, Paul scatters them, and they're forced to do it, right? They're forced to. I feel we're in that same position right now. So if I were to challenge anything, it would be brothers, sisters, take up the challenge that Christ has given you. He's given you the ability to rethink, reimagine, re-engineer.
That is wonderful. I do believe we have not only the excuse to rethink, but just the challenge to rethink. And I think we have a stewardship right now to just say, wow, this is a great time to reevaluate. And I'm also just thinking we need to build those times in, because does it really have to take a worldwide pandemic for us to stop and think, what are we doing? But thank you for all your work, for your writing. I'm looking forward to the next book. I hope there's a great movie theme to it as well as your others. I'm not sure what.
It's got some stuff in there.
Okay, good.
I will say this, JD. They asked me to write a textbook, and I said, I'm not qualified to write a textbook. I have no PhD. I got a master's, but in theology, but I'm not the right guy. And they said, no, we want a practitioner textbook. And at a certain point, I had to say, look, I'm going to write this for the planner, not the professor. I don't care if professors buy it. This has to be for the planner. And they said, bingo. That's what we want, is a book that planners can literally take off the shelf at the bookstore and get something out of it. But a professor would also pick it out and say, this might be the best book on church planning that I can have my students go through. Hopefully it accomplishes both. I don't know. I'm too close up to it. I can't tell.
I'm sure it will make a major difference. Hey, thanks, Peyton, for being with us today. Thanks for what you're doing. Keep up the good work and keep going for it. That's Peyton Randolph Jones. God bless. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.